Hey, what's up everybody? Gonna be working on another car video today. Got my Jeep all ready. I'm gonna be replacing my front shocks and the springs. I bought the assembly as a one piece all together, so I'm just gonna swap them out completely. It's gonna be easier if you do the whole assembly like this than trying to do just your shocks. I got these for about $130 a piece at AutoZone, which is pretty good considering some of the shocks alone are over $200 just by themselves without the coil on them. So, but we're gonna go ahead and start working on it and start replacing these shocks. My Jeep is a Jeep Grand Cherokee 2008. It's got the 5.7 liter V8 in it, Hemi. So that's what we're working with today, Overland Edition. So let's look at some landmarks first. So our shocks are right behind our tires, and they're connected to the vehicle right under here. So this is our power distribution center. So we're gonna have to loosen some bolts here, some nuts, and move this out of the way. On the other side, right behind the tire, it's right underneath the coolant reservoir. So we're gonna have to move this air intake hose here, the air box, and then we're gonna have to move this coolant reservoir. Got all my fishing stuff in the back, but I need a tire iron right there. There we go. That'll do the job. All right, so first things first, we're gonna remove this air box, air intake hose right here, just to get this out of the way. And then we're going to work on moving the coolant reservoir. It's a good time to check your air filter. Make sure it's clean. I have a K&N, so it might use a little cleaning later on. There we go. Got to pull that off on this little bolt right here, a little retaining clip for the coolant reservoir. I just pulled it off with some pliers and it popped off. If you can't get it off, you'll have to cut it off. You can pick these up at AutoZone though too. Your overflow tubing here for coolant reservoir. Let's see if I can break the seal here. There we go. Just put a bottle there just so it can collect anything that drips out of the overflow reservoir. So you can see we have some coolant draining out of there. It's not a lot, but you don't want that to go all over the floor. Alright, so there's some wire clips on the coolant reservoir. This one you can just pull out, it'll pry right out. And then you have one down here for these wires. This one just sits on top of that screw. If you just pull it, it pops off. So now we need to take this bolt out right here so we can take the coolant reservoir out of here. Here's a little trick if you're having trouble, if you don't have a long enough socket to get that bolt out. This is how the bolt is made, so you have to get all the way down. If you don't have a long enough socket to get down there, if you have a drill, all I did was tighten it down on there. I got it loose first and then I just tightened it down, used the drill to pull it out. Came out real fast. One last thing to loosen up is this right here on the coolant reservoir. It's just a little plastic clip. So I'm going to put a flathead screwdriver in there and just pry it up. Reservoir should be loose. Now we can go put that aside and keep it out of the way. Alright, now we have access to our mounting brackets for the shock underneath. Go ahead and work on moving the power distribution center here. Got a couple of bolts here. Got one right underneath here, one right here. Work 3 night shifts.
What's wrong now?
Shocks. I'm finally replacing them. There we go. Now I can get to that one. Oh yeah. Alright, so in order to get to this bolt right here, I had to loosen this up. It's held on by some clips on the front and the back, and there's one on the side. And then I had to loosen this main terminal right here so I could lift it up enough to where I could get access to that bolt. So I'm going to work on getting this loose. It's held on by these 4 little brackets here. So I'm going to get this box loose because I think there's a bolt underneath this holding the plastic shield in place. So let's get to work. In order to get this out of the way, kind of had to remove this clip from right here, and there was another clip back here holding that in place. There's another clip back here. This clip right here was in that little hole, so I took that out. This clip right here was sitting along this little clip here. So I loosened those up, that way I could lift this up. If you can finagle all the other wires out of the way, can get this out of the way. That way you can have access to your bolts. So that should be good enough for me to have access to all my bolts, instead of having to disconnect all these wires and put it back later. Alright, so once you get your coolant reservoir out of the way and your power distribution center, go ahead and remove the 4 mounting nuts that are holding the shocks in place. So I'm going to get to working on removing these 4 and removing those 4 mounting nuts. Alright, took me a minute, but I finally got them off. I used like the little bar that I use for my lug nuts. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. Take those four nuts off there, holding the shocks in place. Last one. So in order to start taking that shock off, we're going to have to take our tire off. So I'm going to start working on the tire and get those out of the way. Alright, so I'm going to jack up the car, put a jack stand underneath there, hold it up, take the tire off, take the brakes off, and then work on removing the shocks, the old shocks. Alright, got the front passenger tire off. So we already got the top bolts loose. Now I need to work on getting this bottom loose down here. Alright, now that we have the bolts removed at the top and the tires off, we're going to remove the brake caliper adapter bolts. We're going to remove this and suspend it, support it somehow, so it's not dangling by the brake hose there. We just want to get this out of the way. We're going to remove this upper ball joint nut right here and separate the ball joint from the knuckle. After that's out, the shock absorber is held in down here. We're going to remove this lower Clevis bolt down here, right here. And then we're going to remove this lower stabilizer bolt right here, the stabilizer bolt. So we have a lot of bolts to remove, and I'm going to go ahead and get working on that. The caliper off. I'm supporting it with this rope up here. So I'm going to work on getting this upper ball joint out right here, disconnected from the knuckle. Alright, so to separate this ball joint here, I had to go and rent a puller. I rented this from AutoZone. Alright, just popped it loose. Now I can screw it out by hand. I had to jack the arm up a little higher just to get it out. There we go. Now I'm going to work on getting the lower arm nut out of there to take this bolt out, and then the stabilizer bolt out of there. This one's on there pretty good, so I'm really going to have to work on this one. There we go. Whew. Just so you guys know, that is a very large bolt. I had to go out and buy a size 24 millimeter socket for it. Alright, there we go. There we go. Got the nut off. Now I need to get this bolt out of there. Alright, working on that lower stabilizer arm now. There we go. Lower stabilizer arms out. Alright, so this has been kind of tricky. I didn't know how to take this bolt out of the lower clevis joint. So I grabbed a hammer and it started moving. So there we go. So you just tap it out. It'll come out the other side. Make sure you have a jack underneath your arm right here. So you have your lower stabilizer arm disconnected down there, right? This is the only thing holding up this arm down here. So once you take this bolt out, this arm down here is going to swing down. So I'm just putting my jack under there. Just jack it up high enough, just to where it's giving it a little support. And then I'm going to take this bolt out. That way this arm just doesn't drop. Let's go ahead and keep tapping that bolt out of there. Try to take the tension off that bolt so I can pull it out. There we go. Alright, now it's coming out. I'm just going to wiggle the clevis joint as I'm pulling that bolt out. The bolt's a little rusty, so maybe I'll clean it with some PB Blaster or something. There's the bolt. Got a little hose back here clipped into place. I'm going to push that clip out in a second so we can disconnect that little hose. There we go. This is that hose I was talking about. It just has a little plastic clip that you just need to take out. You just squeeze the top and the bottom. I just use my little screwdriver and it pops out the little hole back there. And we are loose. So we're gonna go ahead and take this passenger shock out of here. And there it is. Now, I need to remove this bracket right here and put it on the new shock. So I'm gonna continue taking this bolt out here, transfer it over to the new shock. The bolt is out. Let's see if I can get it loose. Yep, there it goes. There's your bracket. There's your old shock. Now you're ready to transfer it to the new one. Start putting the new one on. Use a piece of wood, tap it on. It's going. Gotta line up those holes first. Oh, I think we're there. Yeah, I think we're good. Let's go ahead and put that bolt back in. Oh yeah. That's our new spring, ready to start putting it in. So get the top in first. Oh wait, might need to remove my the nuts up here, factory nuts. Get in there, buddy. All right. Beautiful. All right. Whoa. There you go. As you can see, that bolt in the lower clevis joint, I just tapped it in by hand actually. So I'm gonna get the washer started over here for the lower clevis joint, just to kind of hold it into place for now. So I'm gonna connect this back to the this ball joint back into the knuckle here, and then I'll clip this hose back into the back of the spring. I'm gonna go ahead and work on connecting the lower stabilizing bolt back down here and work on putting everything back together and start doing the driver's side in a minute. As you can see, I have the 4 bolts almost lined up, but they're still hanging out a little bit. So I'm gonna have to jack up this arm down here that I let down so I can push this spring back into those holes so I can bolt it up top. And also so I need to jack it up so I can reconnect the lower stabilizer arm. All right, let's go ahead and take care of that. So you wanna make sure those bolts are lined up before you jack it, so. Looking good. So I'm just gonna give it a little pull. There they go. All right. So I want to jack this up high enough so I can get that lower stabilizer arm bolt back in there. Let me bring this camera over here so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. As you can see, right here I need these to line up. So keep going up a little bit. There we go. There we go. Work on tightening this bolt now. Got myself a nice little torque wrench here. That bottom lower stabilizer bar is 85 pounds. Let me look at the book again. 85 foot-pounds of torque on that lower stabilizer bar bolt. So I'm gonna go ahead and dial in 85 foot-pounds of torque. There we go. That's how you know it's torqued down. Now, the torque settings for the Clevis joint down at the bottom, Clevis bracket, 125 foot-pounds of torque. So this goes up to 150. So let me dial into 125. If you've never used a torque wrench, you got your measurements there. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm dialing. There's 120. So there's about 125. All right, trying to get 125 foot-pounds here. There it is. There we go. Oh, dialed in. It's always good to have a torque wrench. I got that torque wrench for 30 bucks at AutoZone, so go pick yourself up a nice torque wrench. We're gonna connect this ball joint to this knuckle up here. All right. So you just gotta put the bolt on there and tighten it down. And that is going to be the upper ball joint to knuckle, 55 foot-pounds of torque on that one. All right, so this is kind of weird. The way you gotta tighten this, you're basically gonna use the nipple here on the bottom of the ball joint and then hold this down with a adjustable wrench. All right, I'm dialed into 55 foot-pounds. have all those in place, I'm going to go ahead and clip this little hose back here into the back of this, the new shock right there. Alright, so we got our Clevis joint connected, our lower stabilizer bar. We have the ball joint and the knuckle connected. Now I just need to work on putting the caliper back on and put the tire back on, and then we'll switch over to the driver's side. Alright, nice new shiny shocks in there, looking good. Let's go ahead and get the tire back on. There we go. Woo. Passenger side done. Let's go do the driver's side. Alright, let's get to taking this wheel off. Let's get the brake caliper off like we did the other side. Alright, now, again, the ball joint with the knuckle, work on loosening that up. Very good. Alright, take our clamp, line it up. I gotta pull it back out a little bit. If you've never used a puller like this, you just gotta get it on there. Tighten your wing nut down on this side so it doesn't slip off the top. Keeps it tight at the top. You're gonna take your bolt, line it up with your nut, or line it up with the other bolt, and then you start twisting and it'll pop that knuckle loose. We're just gonna start tightening. It's gonna start pushing, and when it pops loose, you'll hear it, you'll know it. It'll be like a little pop. Boom! There you go, that's how you know you broke it loose. Go ahead and remove the clamp. Got the ball joint out of the knuckle. Now we're gonna work on the Clevis joint bolt and the lower stabilizer arm bolt. Take both of those out as well. And I'm gonna but pop this little hose out of here. Alright, that little hose is popped out of the back. There we go. That one came off nice. Better than the other side. There it is. There it is. Good deal. Alright, Clevis joint. Nut is off. Now I'm gonna take this lower stabilizer bar bolt out of here. So remember, when you're disconnecting both these bolts, the lower stabilizer arm and the Clevis joint, make sure you have your jack supporting the arm under there. That way it doesn't just drop on you. I think it's out. Oh, there we go. Just had to pull it up. So remember, I was able to tap it out, but only after I lowered the jack a little bit. That Clevis joint is the last thing you need to worry about. So once I lower the jack, let this arm fall, that I can tap this bolt out of the Clevis joint here. And it'll also, as I lower the jack, it'll pull the shock from the top of the support. I'm gonna lower the jack. Watch up here if you can see it. See how the shock just start popping out of there. Oh. Move that arm out of the way. There it goes. See it coming loose? Boom. So once I see that coming loose, I'm going to tighten the jack down. I'm not going to lower it all the way. And now I'm going to start tapping that Clevis bolt out of there. There you go. See? Oh. Give it a couple of shakes, a couple of twists. Maybe if you need to wiggle the Clevis joint a little bit. And there we go. Got the bolt out. There's your Clevis joint bolt. Now, go ahead and pull this old spring out and transfer the bracket to the new one, just like we did on the other side. Put the new one in, bolt everything down. Oh, yeah, there we go, buddy. Lined up. Whew. There we go. Get this size 24 nut in place. Get the lower stabilize arm, but we'll have to jack up the arm to put this back in place. Beautiful. All right, torque specs for this, 125 again. Torque this Clevis bracket down. There it is. The lower stabilized arm, 85 foot-pounds of torque. Let's get this upper ball joint and knuckle lined up. For this one, we have to use a smaller 8mm and screw in the bottom and hold this with the adjustable wrench. Connect this hose to the back of the new shock. So 85 pounds for the lower stabilizer, 125 for the Clevis bolt, 55 for the ball joint and knuckle. Let's go ahead and get our caliper back on, and I'm going to put these bolts on the top here just to kind of hold it in place for right now. Here we go. 140 pounds, foot-pounds of torque on the calipers. And guys, I can already tell just the way it's sitting. Those shocks are already a little better. I can just tell by the way it's sitting, it's a lot higher now. It's not sagging so low. Next, I'm gonna have to replace the rear ones, but they're not blown or as bad as the front ones were. The front ones were just, every time I hit a speed bump or a pothole, it was just knocking it. It just sounded like the engine was loose and the car would just bounce like crazy. And my tires are wearing unevenly, so you know, those are all signs of bad shocks. I'm gonna go ahead, since I'm running out of daylight, I'm just gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and line all these back up, get my wires plugged back in. If you disconnected anything, you gotta put your reservoir back on, put your air filter back in and your air intake hose, hook up your overflow tube to your tubes. This goes to your air box, this goes to your coolant reservoir. So make sure you put all those back in place and you should be good to go. I'm not going to go through the steps of putting those back on. You guys can figure that out. I'm going to hook my battery back up and then I'm going to take her out. We got some big speed bumps in my neighborhood. See if the new shocks are doing what they're supposed to do. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys later.